Are you a woman of faith who is struggling to navigate your current season of life? Do you feel like life is just happening to you instead of for you? My name is Jill Pack. I'm a certified life coach and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I want you to know that no matter your season or circumstance, it is possible to create a more joyful life. And I would love to show you how. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Seasons of Joy podcast. This is episode number 58, entitled The Emotional Flu with Natalie Clay. I'm so excited to be here today. How is everyone doing? It's a little bit interesting up here in Cache Valley. As I sit down to get this podcast all ready, I'm looking out my window and there is 6 to 8 inches of new snow. It's hard to believe. I live in Cache Valley and it has definitely been a long winter, as I mentioned on the previous podcast, but yesterday it felt like spring had sprung. My husband was even out on the golf course. All the snow on our deck had melted. We still have snow in our yard, but we had seen some progress, and I was in Salt Lake yesterday and it was warm and it just really felt like spring was here. But today we woke up and there is more snow. I'm looking out on my deck that was melted yesterday, and there is 6 to 8 inches of fresh, white, fluffy powder. It's just so interesting. I'm not sure what to think about it, but here we go. Here we go to second winter, I think, or maybe third winter. Anyway, before I get started with this week's episode, I wanted to remind you of my one-on-one coaching program that I call the Season of Creation. And in this program, you get 12 55-minute one-on-one coaching sessions with me. And we work together to discover the stories that are holding you back from creating a life you love. I will teach you concepts and tools that will help you get greater self-awareness and perspective of where you are and where you want to go in your life. We work on building self-acceptance and self-compassion on the way to becoming the creator of your life. You will learn how to step into who you want to be in this season of your life, in your relationships with yourself, with others, and with God. And if you want to learn more, just click on the link in the show notes to schedule a free discovery call with me. So on to this week's episode. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you, and I'm going to be talking with my friend, my mentor, and a coach colleague, Natalie Clay. Natalie is a wife, a mother of 5, and a certified life coach specializing in coaching couples. I have had the opportunity to be taught by Natalie as well as coached by Natalie, and I've watched her coach other people, and I really love her unique approach to coaching. She assumes inherent goodness in everyone she works with. This means there's no assigning blame, just a logical approach to help better love yourself and your spouse with fail-safe tools to get you there. It is so fun to watch her coach couples. She is a master at it. And last year, I was at a retreat in California where she actually coached me on a subject that I had going on in my life, and she helped me really understand the self-coaching model, which I teach all my clients and I've taught on this podcast, in a whole new empowering way. I left that experience with a greater understanding of navigating the emotional part of life. Here is my amazing conversation with Natalie Clay.
So I am Natalie Clay and I coach couples primarily. So that is what I really love to do, is I really love trying to understand that complex dynamic in a marriage where I feel like we don't get a lot of preparation going into that. And we just kind of have this idea that, well, if you're a really good person and I'm a really good person, then yeah, we'll grow and we'll have struggles, but it's going to be cute little struggles. It's not going to be anything very, painful, we'll be there to support each other, right? And so when that inevitably isn't the experience that most people have, then we're kind of left feeling like, oh, is it me? Am I kind of a bad person, or are you? And kind of get in trouble from there, where I think if we have some information about how to maybe approach that relationship in a different way, that we can, I just think, man, it would have been nice to have had some tools going in. So I really love offering that to people.
I love it. And I have observed you via your podcast and other presentations you've done coaching people. And I have loved watching you coach couples, because I think that's a skill that I don't know that most people know that how big of a skill that is, because to manage two people who are having trouble in that relationship and holding space for both of them.
Sure.
It's quite magical as I've watched you do that.
I think I have ADHD, and that really lends itself to coaching two different people, but I think it's a skill for sure. Anyone who's interested could learn. I don't think I have anything special at all, other than a real desire and a real passion for it.
So how did you come to coaching, and what led you to coach couples?
Yeah. So my sister, Jody Moore, who a lot of people know, she got into coaching, and I didn't really know a lot about it. She would tell me some things, and I'll be honest, even when I heard the term life coach, I was like, ooh, I'm not so sure about that. But then I started working for her kind of in the back end of her business before she started her membership and things. And as she got that going, and so that's how I was really introduced to some of these ideas. And I did really like the honest approach, and it's definitely a more logical approach than therapy. And I think there's a time and a place for both, but it did seem like, oh, there's a lot here to work with, and a lot of help that could offer in addition to therapy and things like that at different stages of life. I think we need different things. And so that's really how I got introduced to it. And then from there, I decided to go through coach training. And for the first year, I had the envied position of being able to just work in Jody's business as soon as I got certified, so that I could just coach a ton for that first year. I did all the private coaching in her business. And in that situation, I was coaching anybody really on anything they wanted coaching on, which was really great. But I found that I really gravitated towards those relationship calls. But I always enjoyed that. I always loved that. I loved the complexity. And I loved that, man, there's so much pain here. And I've experienced pain in my own marriage that this can really help alleviate. And so I just found myself thinking about that dynamic all the time. And it was just pretty obvious that, oh yeah, this is what I really want to do. And I remember in coach training, they'd said, it doesn't matter what your niche is, pick anything, you'll get sick of it. It doesn't matter, just pick your niche. And, but that hasn't been the case for me at all. And I do think it's okay to take a little more time personally to choose that. But that is something that kind of organically came about. And to this day, I've never gotten sick of my niche. And I love coaching couples.
Wow. Awesome. Well, I did want to spend a little time on something that we spoke to before we got on recording, but I wanted to talk about this idea of holding two emotions at once. And I'm going to preface that with this story of I went to a retreat where Natalie and Jody were, and they were teaching us and coaching us. And in this particular session, Natalie coached me, and I don't know if she remembers this because she coaches so many people, but
of course.
I was struggling in a relationship, not a spousal relationship, but with adult children. And I was struggling with something that had happened, and I had worked through the model, thought myself to death, and I still couldn't get to feeling peace about it. Like, because I was holding on to, I kind of believed what I felt. And so trying to change what I was thinking wasn't really setting in. And so the way you presented it is just, in essence, was before I could forgive them, I had to forgive myself for being mad at myself that I wasn't doing it differently.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to speak to that. I don't know if that even
Yes.
makes
No, I
sense.
love that example. Yes. And that is something I feel really strongly about, because I think as soon as, I think as adults, if we're in a situation where we're upset with someone, we have this idea that, well, I'm an adult and I have control over my thoughts, is what we sometimes believe. And to be honest, I don't fully believe that, but and not to the extent that we try anyway to take control. But if that's the case, if I can see that, you know what, I'm supposed to forgive, and I want to forgive, I don't want to have hard feelings towards them, then we're instantly putting ourselves in a position of shaming ourselves. I shouldn't feel the way that I actually do feel. And so I should just have this thought of, you know what, this is happening for me. They're a teacher for me, or something else that, again, I think we have to look at what are the fruits, what are the results of that. So if I decide to try that idea of, you know what, they're teaching me something, this, it's okay that, or I'm upset with them, but they're going to teach me something, wherever we go with that. If that feels good and empowering to you, then that's really helpful. But the problem is, like what I hear from you, and what I did hear from you at that time, is you weren't really there yet. So then you're telling yourself, I should forgive. And yes, we do want to forgive, but that doesn't mean we should right now, right? That's the big difference. It's kind of setting an agenda for ourselves. It's conditionally loving yourself by saying, I know I should forgive, therefore I need to forgive right now so that I can accept myself. And the problem with doing that is it turns into resentment towards them. You're really disconnected from yourself. You're really lying to yourself, which you can't actually do. So it doesn't resolve. It'll keep lingering for a while. So what I suggest instead is exactly like you mentioned, is we have to start with, okay, I do have big feelings in this moment, and they might even feel petulant and immature. And I can see that this is a great person, and I'm still really mad at them. And that goes back to, we have to be able to work with our fear brain as well as our spirit, that are ultimately, we have to be able to work in tandem with both. Our fear brain has felt like there was an attack on us. So by saying, you know what, I should just roll over and forgive them, that feels, if our brain thinks that's really dangerous, we can see why it wouldn't just give in to that. So it's really a biological component. But if we can just go to the place of, you know what, I am really upset with them, and that's okay. I'm going to forgive me for not being where I want to be in my life yet, which is someone who forgives instantly. I do still want to work on becoming that person, but clearly this moment shows me I'm not there yet. And that's hard, but also understandable, because I'm going to be a flawed human this whole life experience, right?
Yeah.
So then, like you were saying, with holding two different emotions at the same time, it's, yes, I can see that there's really great reason to forgive them, and they're a great person, and maybe they were just insecure when they said or did this thing, and I'm really struggling with it, and that's okay. And then it's sort of just hitting pause on rushing to the part where we just forgive and everything is fine, because we can't force that before our brain is ready for that.
Yeah. I just love that so much, because I think as soon as you explain that to me, it's like you asked me, what would you feel if you could forgive yourself first? And that it was okay that you felt the way you did. And the word I said was relief. It was such a huge relief in that moment. It was like, I just let go of this idea that I had to be in a certain place when I wasn't there yet, because it still felt so raw and wrong, right?
Yes. And it's well intended. You're wanting to feel better. You're wanting to forgive. All those are great things. But like you said, you have to start with the truth about where you're at. So I do think it's a much more honest approach, because it's not covering up that part of you that's upset in order to decide that we can like ourselves. But unfortunately, what that also does, if we're not really ready, is it puts us in a position where we almost feel above the other person who we're forgiving. So like, well, it's all of our thoughts, and I can just change my thoughts. So you know what? They're here for my benefit, but we still have that resentment, and it's ugly. It's all it's ugly.
No, that's such a good point. I don't know that I would have thought of it that way, but when you explain, like there's almost this up leveling or being above the other person. I can really see that. I can
Yes.
see
And
that.
I think that anytime we're feeling that, we know we're in the wrong.
Yeah.
And we're just doing it to cover up what we really feel, right? So
Yeah.
it's like this roundabout way of trying to feel good, where it's like, so when you ask that question of like, okay, but what would I get to feel if I could just forgive myself? Like sometimes when we're not sure, like, how do we know, is it the time to forgive or not? The example I like to give is, if you called that friend of yours that you know loves you no matter what, and you know they're a really great person, so you trust them as a judge of character, what is it you're wanting to hear when you tell them, this person really upset me? And 99.999% of the time, what we're wanting to hear there is, are you serious? Of course you're mad. That's so
Yeah.
annoying. I'm so sorry. And we don't necessarily want them to start attacking the other person, because usually the reason we're wanting to get through this is because we do love and respect the other person. So we don't have to go there, because that's out of integrity. But it's okay to say, of course you're upset. And that brings so much relief. So if that's what we're wanting to hear, I suggest calling a friend that you know will offer that, or tell that to or keep telling that to
Yeah.
yourself. This is how I feel. You better believe that's how I feel. And it's hard.
Yeah.
Then we can just hit pause. We're not taking action. We're not trying to scramble to make it go away so that we can like ourselves and decide we're more righteous and forgiving. It's like, oh no, right now, oh, I'm mad. You better believe I am. And that feels strangely very empowering and good. And then our brain can process through the emotion and it will resolve so much faster. So much faster. We'll be able to forgive them so much faster.
Yeah, I just love that. And then I would love it if you, so once we're in that place when we've recognized it's okay to feel this negative emotion while inviting something else like forgiveness or relief
Yes.
in there, then and most of my listeners know the model, right? And I just love the way you teach the rest of this that kind of goes in tandem with that. So would you mind speaking to that?
Yes. So in terms of the model, that's helpful to know. So for those of you who do know the model, it's what I suggest doing in that moment is just write out, I call this your truth. Now, our truth is an eternal truth and it can change tomorrow. And it's not true for me, therefore it's true for you. This is just my truth in this moment of time. But let's just get all those thoughts out of your head because they're floating around in there to try to solve the situation. And usually what that looks like is, am I being unreasonable or are they really a jerk? So when you find yourself trying to decide, do I need to attack me or should I attack them? That's how you know this isn't the time to resolve. This is the time that you need to just hit pause. So the process for that I recommend is sometimes it does just help people to just get all those thoughts out of their head, just to show like, yep, here's what we're working with. But have the full picture, which is, I think they're so great and I love them and they've been there for me so many times. And I did not like that they did this. And I think they were so rude and so inconsiderate. Okay, what else? Just write all the thoughts down. And then again, we're not trying to solve it or decide what the real truth is because it's incredibly complex. I'm complex, you're complex, we all are. And we know that, but it relieves us from having to understand all of our past history and psychology and trauma and everything else, and just be true to what is in the moment. So it's, here's all my thoughts in the moment. Then I put that in the circumstance line. That's my truth right now. Now, then we go to our thought, which is really, there's one or two thoughts is all I really vacillate between usually when I'm doing this, but it's, you better believe that's how I feel, or yeah, that's my truth right now. And that's hard. Something that brings that relief or validation is what we're trying to get to. So then if you take it down into your feeling line from there, there's probably a ton of different feelings because each of those different thoughts that are now our circumstances, right, are all causing us lots of confusion and anger and sadness and guilt and all the things. So we're letting that be there. But predominantly when our thought that we've taken from that circumstance is, and you better believe that's how I feel, it's we're feeling some pain and validation for our struggle. Of course, we're feeling that way. And then if we take that into our action line, this part I call the emotional flu, I think is a way to kind of explain how to deal with it. Like if you're feeling sick from the flu, what do we do during that time? We're not trying to not feel the flu. We know we just have to wait it out. And it's awful, but we don't spend a ton of time saying, okay, was it that door handle, or who was I around that could have, should I have gotten vaccinated? Like, we don't spend a lot of time reviewing that and shaming ourselves, right? And we also don't spend a ton of time trying to decide, well, it doesn't bother me. I'm going to go for a run. The flu isn't stronger than me. I'm going to go for a 20-mile run right now because this is happening for me. This is my moment to shine. Because what would that do? That would make it a lot worse for us physically. What we have to do is know, this part's the worst. So I say in that moment, we're switching out positivity, which is a lie in that moment, for optimism.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to pause that for a second.
Please, yeah.
I think that is a powerful thing to understand,
Yes.
because so many people do get stuck on that belief that if I just think something different or whatever, just that coaching is about positivity. And I love in this, as you're explaining this, it isn't about even necessarily inviting positivity into the scenario. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, that's a great question. So, and I think we can tell by the results of that as well, because we all have a different emotional range is the way I describe it. So some people are more logical thinkers, they're less emotional, and positivity really works for them, which is why they sell it so hard to us, because they want to help us get out of pain. But I'm someone that has a much deeper emotional range. That means I experience the lows lower and the highs higher. It's just, it all is going to balance out. But when that's the case, and if I'm struggling with something and it feels big, if I tell myself, just be positive, and I'm not feeling positive, that's coming from should and shaming, and I should forgive, or this shouldn't be bothering me. So any of those shoulds, watch for those. And again, that's going to be really shaming. That's not actually going to help. It's just going to keep all the emotion around longer. So, and it's really a lie. If I'm telling myself, oh, it's not, everything is great, this is all happening for me, I don't really believe that. So I'm actually lying. So if it feels like a lie to you, then I said, no, I'm not positive right now. I'm mad right now, or I'm really struggling right now. This is super hard right now. And that's okay. That's just my truth right now. And I could no longer just change that through words as I could tell someone else, and like, you've got to understand how hard this feels. You should just feel the pain of this. They can't either. So this is my truth right now. But then optimism says there's always a way, and I don't need to know what it is. And it's down the road, but we are going to know that is down the road. That is coming. It's helpful to believe that, to give us some hope, but it also allows us to get through this moment of struggle. So again, in our feeling line, we're feeling, pain, but also some justification or validation. Then our action is, when we have the flu, what do we need? We feel terrible, but we do whatever is necessary to help us get through that time. But we know it's just going to take time. We're optimistic that our body is constantly physically healing us. And I believe our brain we are also emotionally healing naturally also, but we just need to sometimes stop interfering with the process, which can be changing our thoughts if it's not the right time for that. It can be shame, it can be blame. So instead, what that looks like during that time of emotional flu is, man, I'm so upset. Now, how do I deal with that time? Well, what do you want to do is what I always ask people. I don't know. I don't really want to go out to dinner with them tonight. Okay, then don't go. But they might be mad. Like, yeah, they might. And that's hard. Which one do you want to do? Nothing's going to feel good right now. You're in the emotional flu. Well, it'd be easier to not go. Perfect. Don't go. So it's like, okay, I'm going to not go. I'm going to change my expectations of myself that I'm not going to be as productive today. I'm going to be in a bad mood, and I don't like that. And that's hard. And it's okay. I'm going to let myself take care of myself the same as I would with the flu, where it's like, okay, what do I want to do now? Well, I'm just going to watch TV for a while. All right, now that feels terrible. I'm going to try to sleep for a while. Okay, I'm going to try to eat. We're just navigating our time to pass the time to get through the pain but trying to minimize the pain in any way we possibly can. But with the flu, we know we can't. So it's the same with our emotional flu when it feels significant. And then when we take care of ourselves during that time, that really reconnects us back to ourself and says, I am here for me. So whatever has offended us outside becomes, over time, as we practice this, becomes much less impactful, because we're establishing that we don't have as much dependence on that for us to get by. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
So then our result in that is really, the only result is I'm my place of safety and security. That's what we're working towards.
Yeah. And the more you do that, the easier it is to get to that reinforce that, I guess.
Yes.
One thought that came to me as you were speaking, and I would love to hear how you would frame this, is what would you say is the difference between taking care of an emotional flu and buffering?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How would you explain the difference between those two?
So I really don't teach buffering to my clients anymore because I think we're getting too caught up in the moment of, well, this is going to lead to a negative outcome. If I'm feeling bad and then I eat a bunch of food, then I feel worse about myself. And I disagree. I think sometimes eating a bunch of food is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm like, go eat your feelings if that helps you feel better right now. Just like when you have the flu, like, yeah, go watch a bunch of TV. We're not calling that buffering when you have the flu, right? Physically. We're like, yeah, that's what you got to do right now. And yeah, it's going to feel kind of terrible. And then you're going to turn the TV off and do something else. But it's because we're in this moment of just needing to get by to manage the pain. So we're not at the top of our game physically. And same for these situations, we're not at the top of our game emotionally. Now, that said, if we're trying to get rid of the pain through buffering, right? Like I'm going to, and trying to escape that, we can understand why we would want to, but it's just going to delay the process. So we do want to watch for that. But I would say, you know what, if it's not something that is going to cause you problems next week, then okay, you get to make that decision. I'm like, yeah, you might put on some extra weight. Oh, well, who cares? Right? Like, but
Yeah,
and I know we might care about that, but it's like, but this is a tough moment. So we're going to just throw ourselves a bone a little bit. And one way that I think really kind of makes this feel a lot simpler is I think we do a really good job of hopefully teaching this to our kids when if they come home and they're really upset, let's say there was someone at school that said something and they felt really hurt by it. They were left out or they said, I don't want you to come over or whatever. They come home and they're really hurt. What we don't do is say, that kid is a terrible kid, but we also don't tell them, you know what, you shouldn't be hurting right now. We feel compassion for them. We're like, that's so hard. What do you want to do right now? Let's just go watch a movie right now or whatever it is, right? So we want to offer them that support and just validate that, of course, it's hard. And do you see, we're not trying to be positive, but we are being optimistic. Like, you're going to figure this out. It's going to get better. And I don't know how, but it will. Just trust me. And that's enough. That's more than enough to get them through.
Yeah.
So really, it's applying the same thing to us.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I think I can see what you're saying. I think there can be a tendency to almost overanalyze the behaviors that we use to bring comfort in those times. So I like
and
that.
I think you just go to what are the fruits of it, right? So it's like, well, is it buffering that I'm just going to go out to dinner tonight because I'm having a rough day? Is that buffering? We could say it is, but what are the results we're getting? If someone were to tell you, like, of course you're going to go out to dinner and eat something nice, this is a hard day and that feels good, then I'd say that's exactly what you should do. Where if it's like, no, it doesn't actually feel good to go out and eat something, I'm just trying to ignore what's going on, then you're like, okay. But we don't usually come up with ideas like that. So
yeah. So that would be it. That could be the question is, how do I feel when I think about doing this thing?
Yes.
How does that?
And even though I'm still in pain, does it bring any relief? Does it sound like that sounds good? Then I'm going to do it. Because really one of the main things in that action line during that time of emotional flu is we want to delay analysis. This isn't really the time to analyze, am I a good person? Are they a good person? We want to put all that on hold because we're in fight or flight. So we don't want to look at that during this time. This is just the time to like pass the time. Practice, okay, we're going to learn how to be a bit more patient, which that's not fun to learn for our kids or for us, but here we are, right? And self-acceptance and all these things, but it's not going to feel good.
Yeah, I love that. I had a question and it totally left me.
That's all right.
Give me a second. It was this idea. I remember you saying this too, and I have used it in my own practice, is this idea of you're feeling this emotion in this moment.
Yes.
The idea of moments. And so I'd love you to speak about that as well.
Yes, because we're always kind of looking, even when you think about when people say things, or they'll tell me, I'm really worried. What if I'm not a great parent? And I'm like, what might happen? Well, my child might grow up and they might not have confidence and they might not want to have any connection to our family. I'm like, okay, but you're saying that as if there's an end point where now that's what is. Like, there's no such thing. Everything is a moment. So when going back to this experience though, for ourselves, when we're really struggling with something, I think it helps add that perspective of, just like if we have the flu, we know it's temporary. And so we allow ourselves to think of it in those terms. It's just that emotionally, when our brain naturally wants to have control over something, it's going to look at things in absolutes. Like, am I just a terrible person, or is this just a toxic relationship? As if there's some end all be all eternal truth there. There's not. There's just a moment of struggle. So it's like, yeah, this is hard right now, and it's going to get better. And how is not anything I need to be concerning myself with right now, because we don't want to be analyzing that from having to place shame or blame.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that can also help people see that they aren't their emotions when we can put it in that context, as this is something you're feeling in this moment. But if you looked at all your moments through the day, this moment is a small part to that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And it is just a moment. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So such good stuff. So tell my listeners who you work with. And yeah,
sure.
More about
so
that.
I primarily work with couples on their relationship, and I think it lends itself really well to that relationship, because traditionally the help that's been available for couples has been couples therapy, which, if you have success with that, that's fantastic. I have nothing negative to say about that in general. Sure, I do on specific instances at times, but in general, it's great. However, when you think about what we're really most of the time trying to deal with in a marriage relationship, it's not something where we're needing to identify a medical diagnosis. It's not something that we need that approach for necessarily. What we need is something that's more forward thinking. And so I guess my approach is, I guess the difference is, I hear a lot of people say, it's hard to get to that point to reach out for help, because there's always a little trepidation there, where you always feel like, or there's a little bit of a sense of, even if you feel justified that you're upset, there's still a fear of, are they going to say that what I'm doing isn't right? Or like, it's kind of scary, because you think you're going into it in this situation where someone's going to say, okay, here's where you're not being sensitive. Here's where you're inconsiderate. Here's where you need to step it up. Here's where this person has needs, and you should listen to that. And sadly, I think that is how it gets dealt with some of the time. But what I find to be a lot more helpful is to say, okay, with my couples, I always start off with, let's assume the best about both of you. And we don't even need to know if we're right, by the way, but let's assume that we're both good, kind people that are just trying to get by, and also really want the other person to be happy, ideally. And usually people can find the truth in that. There's a couple instances like malevolence exists. There are people that are sadistic and things like that, but this it still accounts for that, right? We can safely assume that, because if we're not trying to solve it by looking at, okay, who's in the right and who's in the wrong, because we are not dealing on the level of eternal truth here. So as couples, as we're working together and we have our individual struggles, that tells us so much about ourselves, our past, our traumas, our insecurities, all these things. And what I think is so fun about working with couples is I find that we're also really drawn to someone that is very different from us. So while that's really great at times, it's also going to really exacerbate your insecurities. And so marriage provides this perfect opportunity for growth or suffering. It's going to be alternative.
Whatever you choose.
Yeah. And so if we can get to a point, because I think that feels a lot more honest to us to say, yeah, I am struggling with that. And I need to know it's okay that I do want this or I don't, or I don't want to have sex as often as my partner, or I want to have sex more often than them. We want to know it's okay that we feel that way, but we also have to let go of this idea that there's a right and wrong there, because there is not. There just isn't. But if we start there, then we're set up to work together as a team, and think of it as we play different roles. We play different positions on the team, but we do have the same end goal in mind. The things that are the most important to us, people are almost always completely aligned on. We want to be happy. We want our kids to be happy, but we have a different approach to how that should be. So Anyway, that was my really long-winded answer, but
Oh, I loved it. I loved it.
But I love working with couples for that, to say like, no, stop being so hard on yourself, because actually, even though that seems like, aren't I being selfish, or shouldn't I be worried about them? I'm like, no, if you're not as hard on yourself, it's going to be so much easier to also allow them to be an individual that's flawed. And then that's when we start having a much more honest relationship, and we get through some of the things that are challenging. And that shows us, wow, we can actually really emotionally connect, because we've seen that we go together even when these things don't line up, even when we do have some moments that are struggles. That's such a deeper, more connected, more honest relationship than you could ever get just by going out and meeting someone that you are physically attracted to.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that one thing that came up as you were talking was just that idea of like, and I think it goes back to our example that I shared about myself, right? Like this translates into couples or the relationship with self so much. But this idea that it's almost like sometimes we believe we have to be hard on someone.
Yes.
Right? It's either the spouse or me.
That's right. Because this shouldn't be. It shouldn't be
like this
hard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I love how you explained that. It was so good. So if people want to learn more about you and they want to hear you, you still do your podcast, right? Couples Coaching. Is that what's the podcast called?
Yeah, it's Couples Coaching with Natalie Clay. I haven't put one out for a while, but I have recorded more recently, and so more are coming. But there is
there's plenty there.
Lots of episodes.
Yes, there's plenty there. And it's so fun to hear you coach both people. Like
I think it is interesting.
It's very entertaining.
Kind of wants that peek in like other people's experience. So it is interesting to hear that.
So I can't recommend that enough. Yes.
And then I have an Instagram page. It's Natalie Clay Coaching. Okay. And I believe is what it's called. And then and that's where more information will come up for different things I'm doing. But then of course I also have a website, natalieclay.com. And there you can find information about, I offer private coaching for couples. And I also offer something called Marriage Lab that is weekly, where I meet with couples, where people come on and some couples will get coached. Sometimes it's just one person, or there are some single people in that as well. And we just talk through different relationship dynamics. And I have a backlog of videos in there for specific topics. If you're dealing with infidelity or mental illness, all sorts of different topics that there's help with. But weekly, we just get right into it. And so you can see like, oh yeah, this is a logical approach that even if some of their specific details are different than what I'm going through, it's the same approach. So it's really fun because people are so supportive in there, where I think it's funny where people think, wow, this idea of going and talking about my relationship in a public Zoom call sounds a lot of people at first are like, no way. But it is such a supportive group. And it's so helpful to see like, we're all struggling. And ultimately, we're all struggling with the same things, just in different specific ways. So it's a really fun group of people.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. So check those links out. I'll have them in the show notes so people can learn more about you and just learn from your wisdom. Yeah, it's just.
And I am getting ready to put out an engaged couples course as well.
Oh yes, really we almost forgot that.
Yeah, wanting to do that for so long, so that's coming out as well.
So will they find that on your website?
Soon they will. It's not up quite yet, but it will be up.
But it will come soon for that. Soon. Okay. So if you have someone in your life that's getting engaged, I cannot recommend. I haven't seen it, but I know Natalie well enough that it will be amazing. And what better gift to give somebody than access to this kind of information. So thanks, thank you so much for being here, Natalie. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks. It's been great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, I would love it if you would share it with your friends and family and leave me a rating and review. If you'd like to learn more about what life coaching is, please schedule a free discovery call with me where we can work together through something that's causing you a problem. Just go to my website, seasons-coaching.com, and you can also find information about my Seasons of Joy one-on-one coaching program and my Seasons of Joy community. Have a joyful week, and I'll see you next time.